Hey there, folks. Mr. Matthew Larson here. Let's talk about how countries can go about and approach different issues that they're going to be facing. First and foremost, it's important to understand that there are really three different ways countries can go about and approach different issues. And I'll explain these each individually so you don't have to worry about all that right now. But there's a unilateral way of approaching things. So you can go about it unilaterally, bilaterally, or multilaterally. Now, important here, look at the root words, right? Uni, one, bi, two, multi, more than at least three or more. So that kind of breaks it down right through here. If you get to the assessment and for some reason you just can't remember what bilateral means, now you know. The first one we're going to talk about, obviously, is unilateral approach. Now, the unilateral approach is when a country or a nation deals with an issue in its own way. This is one country deciding this is what they're going to do. They're going to do it their way. A good example of this throughout history would be the first Trump administration. We're also seeing right now the second Trump administration doing pretty much the same thing. So, for example, of this, the United States pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords during the first Trump administration. They also pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal during the first Trump administration. During the second Trump administration, the United States announced it's going to pull out of the World Health Organization. So these are different things that are unilateral. One country deciding the way that they are going to be doing business. And it's going to be things that are addressing issues that are going to be involving other countries. So it's not just like what they're deciding domestically. It's like, here's how we're going to approach this large issue that we're all kind of dealing with it, but this is what we're going to do. So example, as I said, the Paris Climate Accord Treaty, it was on global warming and climate change within the Earth, and the administration said, nope, we're done. We're going to deal with this our own way. We're not going to do what you're doing. Iran nuclear deal between the United States, Iran, and a number of other nations. Again, the United States just said, we're done. We're not being a part of this. We don't like it, and here's what's going to be happening. Second one is bilateral. Bi means two. This is an agreement between two or a small number of states as well. So if you have like a small collection of states and their approach to doing something with another country, that could be considered a bilateral approach. For example, if you've got the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council from the Persian Gulf area, if those 6 states were to decide to make an agreement with, say, Iran, right, who's not a part of the GCC, that would be considered a bilateral approach because of they're kind of collected all together. So it's a small number of states. This is really, though, two different states working with each other. Good example of this would be Netherlands and Belgium readjusting their borders on the river. I'm not going to try to pronounce that because I will butcher it. Mooij, I would guess, but don't quote me on that one. They had territorial disputes, not major, but some territorial disputes. So they sat down together and decided, here's where our border is. We agree to this together. Another good example of this would be Japan and India working together in 2023 on infrastructure in South Asia. So Japan would be providing some of the funding for that in India. This was an example of a way of these two nations working together to counter China's Belt Road Initiative. So it's kind of that balance of power in the sphere of influence of who's going to be involved in what. But those two nations sat down and worked together to figure out a solution. Last one to talk about is the multilateral approach. Multilateral, like there's multiple pillars in the background, this is an agreement between a majority of states. So a lot of different states sit down together and talk and decide what they're going to do. Example of this would be the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and then the Rome statutes as well. So these are a set of criminal statutes that are used in the ICC. So a bunch of countries sat down together and decided that, hey, we need to have a system in place to hold people accountable, particularly outside of individual countries. So as a world, we're going to set a series of laws, and these are the laws that are going to be followed. This is used for trying war criminals, individuals of that nature. Countries sat down and agreed to this together. It wasn't just one country say, hey, you broke the law, here's what we're going to do to you. These countries sat down, these states together, and came to a conclusion of what was going to be happening. Another organization that would be a good one to talk about, particularly when we're talking about these unilateral, multilateral, and bilateral approaches, would be OECD. This is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This is an organization that uses all different levels, and this is how they deal with trade regulations between different states. So you're looking at states working with one another. They're kind of the outside source or force that's going to guide how this is going to be used depending on the situation. They will use different levels of approaching this, so it might be a bilateral approach. It could be a unilateral approach for a specific state, or it could be a multilateral approach if there's a lot of states that need to be involved in that. This is just one example of an organization that uses all of these quite regularly. A lot of different states, though, will have different levels going on at a different time, largely depending on the state and how much influence it exerts in the world. States that have more kind of a pariah state would be a good way of describing that, like North Korea. Obviously, participating in a multilateral agreement is going to be much more difficult because they're just kind of opposite of everyone else, but they'll certainly have bilateral and multilateral approaches. Continuing forward, if we go here, we can look at this little chart right here. You can see the citation of where it comes from. So you have these three different approaches. Again, more than a large majority of states is going to be there. We're going to have bilateral right through here, and then we're going to have unilateral. So you can see right here, unilateral approach. Examples of this, they're going to adopt regulatory practices that they seek are good for their state. They're going to adopt international instruments. So this is what we're going to decide together. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We don't want to do this. This is kind of what the policy that we're going to agree on. They're going to seek out international intelligence. So what's going on in the world? How does that hurt or benefit our individual state? They'll work and consult with foreign stakeholders. So if one country has a NGO that's working within their company, or a corporation that's in multi-states, right? If it's based out of a different state and they're coming into their state, they'll consult with them, see what's working, what's not working, how can we address the situation if there's any problem, and they're going to assess the impact of their decisions beyond their borders. So not just what is impacting the country here at home, but also how does this decision benefit or hurt others around the world. We also have plurilateral, which is another word for bilateral. Either one of these two terms could be used. This is a memoranda of understanding. So both nations will sit down and say, like, here's what we agree. We both agree to recognize this as our de facto border. So Belgium, the Netherlands, the example I gave earlier, that would be an example of one of these. Mutual recognition and equivalence. So if one state recognizes another state, the other state in turn would recognize them. We're going to have this agreement with you. You'll do this agreement with us, kind of quid pro quo situation going on right through there. They're going to set regulatory provisions and trade agreements. So how do these states work together? What is the requirement in terms of trade? What are some safety agreements and policies that need to be in place? And then cooperation partnerships. So they're going to work together in ensure of regulations to make sure that there's going to be some level of consistency across the board. Lastly, we have multilateral approach. Now, the multilateral approach is participation in international organizations. So participating within the United Nations, UNESCO, to make a certain decision, and also specific negotiated agreements. So examples of this would be like the Paris Climate Accord, right? A bunch of states got down together, sat and discussed what was happening, and that's how they got stuff moving forward. Comments or questions, please do let me know. Otherwise, I will see you later. Good luck.